Gather around, PureSkill family. This your boy Steve, and I'm back at it with another video. Alright, let's get into it. You guys already know what it is from the title and thumbnail. We're gonna be talking about Blender sculpting brushes and how to use them. Now, just a disclaimer: there will be sculpting videos where I have a finished piece and a finished sculpt in the future. But what I want you guys to focus on right now is the actual brushes and what each one does. And me personally, when I'm sculpting, I don't use every single brush. I just use my favorites, and if you stay to the end of the video, I'm gonna show you guys what my favorites are. But what's it called? I'm gonna go through each brush and tell you guys what they do and all of those things and exemplify them. But at the same time, we're going to essentially do that. Now I do have my notes right here so I can cut down some of the stuttering and all of that, so if you guys see me looking at that, y'all know what it is. But what's it called? We're not making an actual scope, just focus on what the brushes do. Watch the next video for more finished pieces, and also watch next videos for more sculpting tips and how to make your sculpts better. We are using Blender, and this is gonna make it way less confusing for you guys. Remember my Blender tour video? If you haven't watched that one, go watch it. You have to think of it as you're just moving around vertices, or you're just playing with clay. If you think of it like that, then it'll be way less stressful, and you will have a better thought process about it, and you won't get bogged down with all the settings and different things that you can do with Blender. Just focus on what you need to do. Okay, so let's get into it. So now right here, the first thing you have to do, which I'll go over more in depth, is getting your geometry to have a better more geometry. You want your it to have more geometry, essentially. What that means is you can't really sculpt in Blender with just a simple cube, because a cube only has 8 points, 8 vertices, you know, those little dots. Or like each corner of a cube, there's only 8 of them. Each corner is a little dot and little vertice, and that's what I explained to you guys in the Blender tour video, how you just have to think of it as you're moving around vertices. In sculpt mode is essentially a more organic way of moving the vertices, so you need more vertices to move. So the first thing you always do is give your default cube a quick subdivision multiplier, and I'll explain all the different ways to give your sculpt and clay more geometry, because that's a whole separate thing. It's called remeshing, and when you guys see that video, make sure to watch it, because that's a major thing, and it's gonna improve your sculpting 10 times, I'm telling you. All right then. So now we enter sculpt mode, and first thing I want you to notice is the panel up top with the with some of these settings. You got radius, you got strength, you got brush and stroke and fall off, all of those different things. You can find these these same exact settings in this panel over here. You'll find they're the exact same settings, don't worry about it. And in this panel is where you find variants of the sculpt brush, which I'll talk about in another video, where you can make your own brushes. But that's where that will be stored. Radius essentially is just how big your brush is, how much space is how much of the clay is being affected by that brush size. So obviously you could think of it just like in Photoshop or a drawing program where you make the brush bigger. That simply is just that you make the brush bigger, you're affecting a bigger area on your little clay ball here. The strength brush is how strong you want it to be. You can set this to pin pressure by clicking that little button right there. You can also do the same with the radius brush if you click it to pin pressure, but both of these can also be changed more manually by using F for radius. You press F and you'll have a size that it will go to, and then you press Control F, and you'll have another size it can go to. You can scale it up using your mouse. Also, if you ever make a mistake, of course you can always use Control Z to back up, and Control I is a way of inversing the effect. So whatever effects that I go through, all brushes can be flipped to do the opposite of what they do. So I'll explain that further in a little bit. But essentially, you can use the inverse of a brush by pressing Control I or clicking the plus and minus up at the top. Okay. So this is the Sculpt draw brush. It kind of draws as you would expect it to do. It does exactly how it sounds. It draws on top of the scope. Draw sharp is the exact same thing. The only difference is the edge is more sharp. It'll draw and the edge is more sharp. Me personally, oftentimes when I'm using the draw brush, I use it on the inverse so it can like make a little crease. It'll just dig into it instead of drawing out of it. You understand? That's like kind of what the inverse of it is. So if the inverse is what you see on the screen, it drawing more, then the opposite is it digging into it. Okay, so right here is the clay draw option, and this is what the clay draw looks like. Obviously you can tell it looks really nice, and it just draws like extra clay onto it. Here's what the Sculpt draw and the draw sharp looks like, more extra. And this is what they kind of look like right next to each other, so you can really tell the difference of what each brush does and when you need it, what you want to do. That's the clay strips brush. It does the exact same thing as the others, but in a more strip look. It looks like a strip instead of the others. Okay, essentially what I want you guys to understand is the blue brushes all add all the blue brushes add more clay to the existing clay. So that's what you're gonna mostly see with the trend of the blue brushes, is you're adding more clay to existing clay. You'll have your clay right there, and then it adds more. This is the clay thumb brush. I don't use it that much, but this is what it does. It kind of just adds like a kind of like the clay strip. The clay layer is more of the clay strips, but like smoother. I don't use that one as too much neither. This is the inflate brush, and I use this one. I use this one pretty a lot of times, mostly when I'm trying to just get something to look more bulky, or if it's skinny or something. But that's pretty much the inflate brush. It inflates different things, right? So here's the blob brush. This one is also a good one to use. You'll need it to add, like I said, blue brushes add. So it's adding geometry, but unlike the clay strips and clay, it's adding it in a ball. Okay. And then this is the crease brush. Even though it's a blue one, it's kind of not adding. It's kind of creasing, but for the most part, blue brushes add. That's just one exception for real. So now I'm getting ready to exemplify the flatten brush, and if you have like a surface like that, you can really flatten it if you need to with this brush. So you see how that just real quick flattened it. So there you go. This fill brush kind of just fills in area. Hold on, let me. If I have like a plane like this, see how that fills in exactly what the area, that's way better. And here's the scrape brush, where it's just scraping off. You see how it just scrapes off area. Now we have the multi-plane scrape. Essentially that's the same thing as the scrape brush, but it does it on multiple planes. I don't use the multi-plane scrape a lot, but I use the scrape brush a lot. So you're just scraping. So right here is the smooth brush, and essentially it just smooths. It's kind of like the eraser, but don't think of it as an eraser, because oftentimes you can use it and you're not trying to erase something, you're literally trying to smooth. But sometimes when you just make mistakes or you're just trying to get a better look at something, you just want to erase, and maybe you did it a while back and you can't just Control Z. But when you want to smooth Don't think of it as eraser. I don't want you guys to I don't want to mislead you guys and think of it as an eraser. It does look like it's erasing, but that's not its main function. The main function is just to smooth a deformed surface, so it's like bumpy and you're smoothing it. Okay, so right here I'm about to exemplify the pinch brush, but what I'm gonna do first is use this draw sharp in the inverse, as you can see how it digged. I'm using that just to create like two sides of the mesh, and then right here I'm use this brush to crease them together so they're getting closer and closer. You understand what I'm saying? They're pinching it together. You can tell the difference like that, and then you pinch it together. Okay, so here's a brush that I use often, which is the grab brush, and you're really just taking an area right there that you have and just moving it, and it makes it really stretchy and really elastic. And it's you can see what it's doing. You just grab what you want and move it. Okay, so here's the elastic brush, and it kind of does the same thing as the grab brush. The only difference is it's like taking a bigger area even more than what you initially grabbed. And the snake brush is kind of like pulling geometry out further. So here's a better example right here. So see how you can drag geometry further out than what it is. So the difference between the grab brush and the snake hook brush, now mind you, I use the snake hook brush also a lot because it's a good brush. So the snake hook brush and the grab brush are different because the grab brush pulls geometry just stretching it, and it kind of makes up for the difference. The same way in animation you have the stretch and the squash and stretch idea. Now the difference with the snake hook brush is it's creating extra geometry. It's actually making more and pulling out. So as you can tell from what you saw, but it's totally different. So if you want an effect like the snake brush has, you can't just use the grab brush because they're not the same brush. The grab brush is not gonna pull the way that's pulling. Now the thumb brush, it's very, I don't use this brush a lot, but you can kind of see what it's doing. It's kind of just being like a thumb, and you're just pushing clay. Now here's the pose brush. The pose brush, what it's gonna do is take an area based off the radius of the, so if you want a bigger area you need a bigger radius, but based off its radius it's gonna pose. You can kind of like get it to move areas of the mesh. So as you can see from what I'm doing right here, you're just moving the mesh and actually, as it's called, posing it more intentionally. And if you want it more space, you make it bigger. Pretty much. Now the nudge brush is kind of like the thumb brush, but it's just nudging it. It's just pushing it ever so slightly. Now for this brush, for the nudge brush, you gotta turn up the strength to really see the difference. So you can really, you just gotta turn up the strength. So you turn up that strength right there, and then bam, you can really see a difference. But I don't use the nudge brush neither that much. I don't really do that. Now the cloth brush is one of the special brushes. The cloth brush, basically what it does is it kind of creates like a cloth simulation, but it's doing it on your brush, and it kind of gives wrinkles to whatever you're using. Here's a good example of what it does. And the the cloth brush, you need to really turn it on the stroke method, um and then it'll work better. You turn it on the line stroke method and it'll work better. You also use a multi-res modifier and it'll work better like that. But I'll explain multi-res modifiers in a later video. All right. Okay, so in right here, I'm gonna go over the mask brush. Now this is a very important brush. I use it all the time. Essentially what the mask brush does is it like blocks a certain part that you highlight from being used or being moved, which is very good when you need a spurgeon part. You can also invert that, so you can invert the brush so that you can take away place geometry by just holding control. Hold control, and then you can take away from your mask that you already drew. Or if you want to invert the mask you already have, so if you have mask like I just had and you want to invert it, you can press control I, and then it'll invert the mask, and it'll, the place that you had mask will be how should I say, it will be free to use. So if you want so this is good for several reasons. So if you want if you have a part that's really good and you're gonna sculpt right next to it, you don't want that part to be affected, you use the mask on it. Then if you want to make the mask less to get less of the mask, then you press control and you can draw the part that you don't want masked. If you want all of your sculpt to be masked, if you want all your sculpt to be masked and then you want only a specific part of the sculpt to be and you only want a specific part of the sculpt to sculpt on, then being smart, the best thing to do is sculpt the part that you want to sculpt on and then press Control I. That will give you a mask on everything except what you want to sculpt on, and then you can sculpt on it. What's it called? And then if you have a mask and you want to get rid of it so you can continue sculpting on all of your sculpt, you press Alt M. Okay. Well, here's the face sets brush. I use this now. I don't use it a lot, but I do use this brush. This is a good brush. This brush really separates your mesh from each other without you physically breaking your mesh or breaking it into separate objects. So what it will do is, with these colors that you see it creating, you can draw on the color every single time. So this is how the face sets brush works. Every single time you go to press with the face sets brush, it's always going to give you a different color, which makes it a different part of the mesh. Okay. If you want to if you draw an area with a color and you want to keep that color, you have to press Control and start drawing into the from the beginning of the, you press Control and start drawing from the beginning of that color and move out to colors that you want, and then it'll continue drawing. So if I have a blue, you start inside the blue and continue drawing outside of the blue to really to get the color that you want. Now these colors are not colors of your mesh. It's not painting the mesh. You're not gonna have a blue character because you face set the color blue. What the colors is doing is it's separating the mesh so that you can hide certain parts. So it's kind of like a mask, but it kind of saves the mask for later, and kind of like a mask. So let me explain. The way a mask works is how I explained earlier, but when it comes to face sets, you can still sculpt on all of the different parts when they're all together. But if you don't want a part to be messed up, you can hide that part because it's a different face set than a different thing, and it's only a different face set because you set that face set. You can draw the face set, as you can see right here. So you see how I'm hiding parts of it. I can't sculpt on the parts that's hidden, but you can sculpt on the parts that's in air in play. You understand what I'm saying? That's you can see. Okay, beyond that, these are less brushes but more just brush settings and different things like that, or brush options. So here's a still masking, but you can mask with a lasso mask or a box mask or just this line. If you want that line to flip and it's going the opposite way, you press F. You have the same thing with the hiding options. You can hide with a box hide. um and then you have lasso and a box face set, so you can actually draw the face set from a box or lasso, like in Photoshop or something like that. And then you have these trim down there. You have these trim brushes, and don't use those. Well, it depends on how good your computer is. um if you have like a super duper powerful computer, you can use those and they might work fine. But for me, sometimes if I'm using them, if your computer is less powerful, it takes a lot of computing power for the, I don't know why. You can just I'll tell you how to get around it, but I don't know why, but it takes a lot of computing power for the computer to cut out a mesh. So if you have a sculpt, and you trim part of the sculpt and you want to delete that much of it, whatever, you're gonna box it or use the trim options down here that I'm highlighting. And what's gonna happen is it's going to like take a long time to process and cut it. And if it's small enough, it might cut it. If it's not, it might crash. But if you have a strong enough computer, you can do it and it'll probably be fine. What's it called? But if you don't have a strong enough computer, what I recommend is just hopping into edit mode and selecting the part you want to cut out and just pressing delete. It'll work the exact same way, and it doesn't take as much computing power. I don't know why it takes so much in scope mode. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Those are all the brushes of scope mode. Now I'm going to tell you my favorite scope brushes right now. Okay, I'm gonna tell you my favorite scope brushes right now, and the idea is these are the brushes that you use the most. This is the brushes that you're gonna use. And so first of all, now I'm looking at my notes, because not because I don't know my favorite brushes, but I'm looking at my notes because when you're in the mode of just painting, of just sculpting a sculpt or doing something, you're not really thinking about this, but you just push it and grab it. Now my favorites are the clay strip brush. I use that a lot just to add scope. It's pretty, you can also use the clay scope one. I don't have no preference to them. I literally just grab whichever one. But the clay strips one, I just use it for adding quick geometry, and then I'll go over it with the smooth brush just to make whatever I did smoother. And ironically, the next one is the smooth brush. My favorite brush is the smooth brush. I really like that one because I'm pretty sure anybody who sculpts uses the smooth brush. When you're just quickly adding geometry, it could be pretty rough, and just use that smooth brush to smooth it out real quick. I also like the scrape brush to scrape things. It kind of acts to me like like you're cutting it off a little bit. Like if you just did a little bit too much and you don't want to just Control Z all of what you did, but you just want to just cut a little bit off, just scrape. And also, even if it's not that deep, like you made an accident or something, just scraping some stuff off is kind of like a good technique just to scrape things off. What's it called? As you can you guys can see all of the ways these things work. I also use the grab brush and the snake hook brush a lot. I use those a lot just to grab brush is mostly I use it for like proportions and different things like that, because when it comes to anatomy, and we'll talk about this in later videos, but anatomy is pretty much the same in whatever species. So like a human's anatomy is the same in all humans, but you kind of use that grab brush to pull things and stretch things to make it the proportion of the person that you want it to be. The snake hook brush, I kind of use that just to add geometry in a specific shape that I want it to be. The pose brush, I kind of use that a little bit. That's not one of my favorite ones, but it's whatever. And then the mask, and then the mask brush. Those are like my favorite brushes. So once again, I'll say it again: clay strips, smooth brush, grab, snake hook, and mask. You use those like 90% of your sculpt. All those other brushes are just like extra stuff if you need to get creative on how to solve a problem. That's pretty much what you're gonna use those for. But we're gonna go to the next video. I'm gonna talk about remeshing your objects, and that's pretty much where you're just adding geometry so that you could get a better sculpt experience and different things like that, and really pace your sculpt. And I'll talk about that in the next video. Like, subscribe if you're new. You know what it is. Turn on post notifications so you know when I'm posting another video.